Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a live breaking news edition of the Sports Note on YouTube. I am your host, Jim Cronetti. Uh, we actually are seeing the end of an era in Cleveland this evening. We are seeing the Cavs are buying out power forward Kevin Love. Um, Love was actually the final remaining piece of the Cavaliers' 2016 championship squad and is 34 years old, will be 35 in September. Um, Played his last 9 seasons here. And quite honestly, this was a day that we all thought uh, was going to come eventually. We just didn't actually know it was going to be like this right in the middle of an all-star break. Now, there have been rumors in the last few years that Love was going to be traded, but nobody actually thought that he was going to be bought out or released or something of this nature. Love is owed $28 million by the Cavaliers this year, and it's the final year of that max contract extension that he signed shortly after LeBron left the second time. They were actually plotting on Kyrie Irving had left uh, the year after the championship. LeBron had moved on a couple of years thereafter. LeBron and Kevin still friends. There was a lot of people thinking that Kevin could end up out in Los Angeles. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But the fact of Love again being owed $28 million on that expiring contract, you knew the Cavs were going to have to do something. And with the fact that they had not really received any credible trade offers the last couple of years, they knew that they were probably not going to have something like that now, considering Love is coming off of a foot injury, which he is still recovering from. According to reports, Love has actually he's actually still being treated for that, even though he's been activated and would be available to play really at any time. He's found his way out of the normal rotation with Coach JB Bickerstaff, but not because of anything that he's done or setbacks or anything. Just when Dean Wade returned after 7 weeks with a shoulder injury, they had to make a decision, and the decision was going to be take Kevin Love out of the equation here and start trying to transition towards the future. Love, a lot of people were thinking, do they sign him for another year? Does he get another Bird exception? Does he sign a 2-3 year contract at a much lower rate to be able to come back and possibly finish his career out in Cleveland, where again he won his lone championship? Um, the idea that the Cavaliers right now, after moving on from Love, are now going to be only $3 million over the salary cap, even after bringing in veteran forward Danny Green, who the Cavs drafted a number of years ago, mind you, and Green is going to be making $10 million essentially the rest of the year. Um, Even with the move that they are going to be this good, that close to the cap number, the only team in basketball right now with a better record and a lower cap number are the Memphis Grizzlies, who are the second best team in the Western Conference. They are in the top 5 or 6 of all teams in the NBA, and they are only $3 million over the salary cap. With the Cavaliers right now, they only have now, by moving on from Kevin Love, they only have 9 players under contract for next year: Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, Chetty Osman, Ricky Rubio, Dean Wade, and Lamar Stevens. And Dean Wade is going to be a very key factor in this here in just a moment. And the Garland extension kicks in. Mitchell is still actually signed for a couple of years. The Jared Allen extension kicks in. The Dean Wade extension will kick in. They are going to have to make a decision on Karis LeVert, who's owed $28 million. And a lot of people were thinking, could Karis LeVert be moved? They still actually have to, they've got some deadline ideas coming up here on Dylan Windler, Isaiah Mobley with a qualifying offer. Lamar Stevens has a non-guaranteed club option. And again, some of their other rookies, they are going to have to decide on the club option for Evan Mobley for 2024-25. So they are going to have to now pay Evan Mobley. He's also got a qualifying offer on the table for 25-26. That's going to be about $14 million as I'm looking now. Dean Wade is going to be guaranteed, his new deal. They do get a $3 million exception because of the Ochai Agbaji trade, which helped them land Donovan Mitchell in the first place. But with the move from Love, again, it is extremely bittersweet because there are some times when the Cavaliers were one of the worst teams in the NBA and were trying to get back into the lottery, that Love, with his play on the field and the idea of some people thinking milking his injuries or taking longer on purpose, some people actually thought, to come back and rehab those injuries, that he did not want to be here. There was an infamous clip a couple of years ago where, after getting scored on, Love just simply kind of slapped the ball back into play where it was stolen and then scored again by the opposition. But the fact that Love, really, since this new nucleus of the Cavaliers, with Garland, Colin Sexton last year, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, this was starting to be something very, very special. And you can tell just the bond that Kevin's had with a lot of these young guys. I was at a game last year where Love literally picked up Darius Garland and walked him back to the bench after a key three-pointer to put the Cavaliers up late. We all remember when him and Chetty went off in a game earlier this year, or even last year. Kevin was notorious for crashing post-game interviews with Serena Winters on Bally Sports and last year Fox Sports Ohio. He's infamous on crashing interviews. We all on radio. He's a huge wrestling fan. We all remember the scene of him carrying the Stone Cold Steve Austin championship belts, smashing beers in the locker room after the title win in 16. Definitely, you could tell that this was the most fun he's had in a long, long time with a group of guys this young. But again, father time always wins, and Kevin Love is 34 years old. Dean Wade was signed to a 3-year extension where he's going to be making just over $6 million a year, and that was actually signed in the offseason. Dean Wade's only 26 years old, even though Dean Wade just came off of a 7-week shoulder injury. Dean Wade, again, much younger, certainly not nearly as experienced because he's a role player, where Kevin Love was a starter for a lot of years between his time in Minnesota, and certainly was a huge piece of the Cavaliers' 4-year Eastern Conference dynasty run to the finals that culminated in that 2016 championship. And quite honestly, had Kevin Love not been hurt in 2015, based off of Kelly Olynyk in that opening round series against the Celtics, the Cavs could have actually had back-to-back championships, because there's no doubt in my mind they would have beat the Warriors that first year if completely healthy, where it was LeBron and a bunch of role players off the bench carrying them to 6 games. But where does Love go from here now? Where do the Cavs go from here now? This is an idea where the Cavaliers right now, with only those 9 guys under contract, they are $17 million under the cap. They are $37 million away from the luxury tax going into next year. I believe they're also, I want to say, between $35 and $40 million away from the luxury tax limit right now, especially in the wake of all this. They are still going to have to carry that cap number through the end of the year by buying him out. Love is getting a lot of talk about possibly going to the Miami Heat. I could see a scenario where potentially he goes to Toronto, help them shore up. He wants to go to a contender that may potentially make a little bit of a run. I don't see a scenario where he goes to Philadelphia, especially with the fact of, the Cavs trying to chase down Philadelphia. I understand that Kevin's going to want to win and possibly get back to another finals, maybe have one more look at a title here. Um, Definitely could be a Kyle Korver type player at this stage in his career. I could see a scenario where maybe towards the end, if he signs maybe a 1 or 2 year deal, that he comes back to the Cavaliers, maybe on a reduced rate. Could this be something where he negotiates a buyout? Um, Wants to um, maybe go back to there's could you see a scenario where he could go back to Minnesota and pair up with Rudy Gobert and Carl Anthony Towns? Wouldn't that be interesting? Kind of a quasi new big three. Considering the way that he kind of started out his career with Marbury, with Stephon Marbury, Kevin Garnett, and then you pull out Marbury and you insert Latrell Sprewell, um, so to speak, especially with Minnesota being, back in the playoff chase and looking to finally turn the corner on their long-standing, seemingly 20-year rebuild at this point since Love was since really that Garnett era. Remember, Love was the focal point of that team for a while, and then the Cavs gave up the farm to be able to get him to be able to make that run in the middle part of the previous decade after LeBron's return. Andrew Wiggins never really achieved his full potential until he ended up getting to Golden State and winning, a couple of titles with them. Um, and Minnesota, really up until recently, there was also a lot of thought that uh, could they possibly be moving on from Carl Anthony Towns and blowing this thing up all over again? And then lo and behold, they end up starting to finally get something out of those picks they acquired uh, with the in flipping Andrew Wiggins to Golden State, which was brought on by the Cavaliers, and then Rudy Gobert comes in and they're kind of back where they were when this entire cycle started, short of just shy of 10 years ago now. Um, I don't Love is certainly not going to be expecting 28 to 30 million dollars. I could see where he's getting 10, 12, 14, possibly even 15 from somebody. I could certainly see Miami, overpaying and going say 18 million, for him for 2 or 3 years, maybe right out there. Although, as a Cavalier fan, not only would it be a little bittersweet that you're losing Kevin Love, one of your most beloved players, in recent memory, to a team that's trying to chase you down in the standings and you've had some very, very close games with, especially this season, but also to lose another beloved franchise player to the Miami Heat. Because remember, it happened with LeBron the first time, and then Love takes the buyout and possibly goes down to South Beach to team up with Jimmy Butler. Um, How ironic would that be? And that's something that nobody really I've heard bring up very much at all since this came out. But he is negotiating the buyout. It was rumored uh, very, very late yesterday evening. It's all been but confirmed by just about every resource from Cleveland.com to ESPN to Fox Sports to CBS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. First thing this morning, it's on the front page of ESPN's website. Um, Kevin Love will have his jersey at one point retired by the Cavaliers, as he does uh, rank in the top 10 of a lot of offensive categories. And again, without the Cavs kind of giving up the farm with Andrew Wiggins to be able to acquire him. They don't win in 16. They don't run to four straight finals. They don't get into the play-in tournament without his leadership last year. And quite honestly, at the early part of this year, especially with some of the injuries that they were having out of the chute, they don't stay competitive to where they're holding down a top four spot in the Eastern Conference. So when LeBron left the first time, people burned jerseys, people buried this team in effigy. People were mad. They wanted their pound of flesh. When he came back, one year championship, and he left the second time, everyone was grateful. There could be a few bitter people. The fact that he left a second time, and now, the endless rumor of him coming back a third time to finish out his career, because he still has a home out here. This is still home for LeBron. Always has been, always will be, regardless of any of his standing in Los Angeles. Um, when Kyrie left, he caused a lot of his own drama between him and LeBron, or him and Kevin. And Kyrie's essentially getting everything that he deserves. Going to the Celtics, that doesn't work out. He goes to Brooklyn, builds a new big three with two other hired assassins who are ring chasing, in James Harden and Kevin Durant. Harden leaves, and now and then Kyrie winds his way out. Decides to be an absolute idiot, and now has been moved on to Dallas. So now he's on his fourth team in the last 5 years. Um, and then again, Kevin Durant, basically airing dirty laundry, so to speak, and getting out. And now, yay! I'm glad I'm in Phoenix. We got all the parts necessary to win. Go watch the blog that's posting to this very channel as we speak, a little later on tonight or sometime tomorrow. Yeah, Kevin, you still have to go through Ja Morant, Luka Doncic, and oh yeah, the two-time defending league MVP Nikola Jokic with the Denver Nuggets, who have the best record in the conference and are also just a game behind Boston for the best overall record in the league. But getting back to Kevin Love again, very, very beloved. Every time he stepped on the floor for the first time, regardless of the standing with the organization, always got applause, was certainly the sixth man up until a lot of the guys started getting healthy now. When Ricky Rubio came back after his 1 year injury with that knee, when Dean Wade came back into the fold, naturally Danny Green is going to be providing a little bit more depth with Isaac Okoro and Chetty Osman to be able to help limit their minutes, get them a little bit of rest, especially for the stretch drive now after the All-Star break, where they're only going to have 25, 30 games at most here. But Kevin also had to know that the writing was kind of on the wall, and this was the right time to request that buyout. No ill will here with this. They would gladly welcome him back. The franchise, his first game wherever he's suiting up with, whether it's Miami, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's Minnesota, whomever it is, when he comes back, I guarantee you'll see 20,562 fans at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And notice I did not actually use Romo Fijo here, because I'm trying to be a little bit respectful of this and not turn this into a little bit of a joke. But 20,562 at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse will be entirely on their feet, giving him a great reception. He'll get a tribute video that'll play during a timeout or after the first quarter. Or whatnot, just like when they did with LeBron when he came back the second time. Never really kind of got that chance, with Kyrie, because Kyrie burned a lot of bridges on his way out, and certainly is nowhere near as well received as LeBron was or Kevin will be at this particular point. Could Kevin maybe want to go home and play in Los Angeles, but maybe actually sign with the Clippers? Rather than the Lakers, he'd still be able to see LeBron in the building. Wouldn't be teaming with him. And how appropriate would that be that if he did go to the Lakers to kind of pair up with LeBron, it's just another example of the Lakers, you know, trying to buy up all the high priced talent and falling flat on their face. And, um, but Kevin will certainly be missed. I do remember vividly that he was whenever I would talk bad about him during the years after LeBron and Kyrie had left and people were trying to run Kevin out of town. I was one of those guys. My grandmother, my late grandmother, it was always her favorite player. She loved Kevin Love. It was next to Mark Price. It might have been her all-time favorite Cavalier. And my grandmother was not a huge basketball fan unless the Cavs were successful. Um, I always got a soft spot in my heart for Kevin Love. I'm a big UCLA basketball fan, as is my father. We loved Kevin coming out. Um, was a fan of his. Got to see him play very early in his career several times when he was with the Timberwolves with Kevin Garnett. Um, when the Cavs were a middle of the road team, back end of the playoff seeding are very very high in the right on the cusp of the lottery. They weren't a top five lottery type pick, and I could always tell that something was going to be very special with Kevin. Whether or not he's a Hall of Famer, he's got an NBA championship. He's never won an MVP. He's got several All Star game appearances under his belt. He's got a gold medal with Team USA. Um, been on several national teams. Um, career probably did not take the turn that he wanted after LeBron left, because Kevin, quite honestly, since he's never really been the guy that you can build an organization around. He's an extremely talented player. He's an extremely valuable asset, but he's not the alpha. It's always something that you had to put somebody around him to maximize his talent, and that's not a knock on Kevin. There are certain guys that just do that. Um, Robert Ory made a career out of it between Houston and San Antonio. Got 7 rings out of it. And yet Robert Ory will never be in the Hall of Fame because he was a role player for most of those. Um, he certainly Robert Ory never certainly was the guy. Kevin Love certainly never was the guy. Kevin Love was an extremely talented player. Kevin Love was a top 25 player in the league. But Kevin was always a guy that you could very well rely on to go out and get you 20, 25 points, maybe bang around and get you 7 or 8, 9 rebounds a game, could facilitate very well. Um, but the injury started to catch up with Kevin in recent years. We remember the shoulder a few years ago. He's been bothered by hand issues for a good chunk of this season, especially it's on his shooting hand. He's been bothered by this foot injury to where he's having it worked on by trainers in practice. He's having it worked on before the game. He's having it worked on in the middle of timeouts. I was at the game 2 weeks ago tomorrow where they beat the Bucks, which was the last time the Bucks lost a game. Yeah, Donovan Mitchell was out for the Cavaliers. Giannis was out for Milwaukee, but still a win is a win because Drew Holiday was still out there. Darius Garland was still out there. Isaac Okoro was still out there. Kevin was suited, but Kevin didn't play, and you could and I where our seats were had a very very clear view of the bench, and Kevin was sitting down towards the end of the bench, where a lot of the guys who are healthy scratches for the night, namely their two-way players, um, you know, typically were, and it wasn't because of the fact that he was moved to the end of the bench in any sort of disciplinary issue. Is that his foot was still getting worked on in timeouts. He was in the middle of huddles. He was working with, he was talking with JB and the coaching staff in the middle of timeouts. Um, but you can also tell that honestly, the last few times that he was in the lineup, something did look a little off with Kevin. His, in terms of his play, in terms of his attitude, Kevin really turned himself into a very, very upstanding professional, accepting his role not as the guy anymore and trying to mentor these young kids. And now these young kids have a guy like a Donovan Mitchell who's been in the league and is an alpha. Um, but the Cavs right now are built so well that they can have an alpha any night that they wanted to. Evan Mobley has incredibly progressed in the last month. Jared Allen is going to give you 150% every single time he's on the floor. Darius Garland could be very streaky. Karis LeVert can be very streaky. Donovan Mitchell's going to have off nights. He's not going to go out and pour, you know, 71 points once a month. He's not going to give you 40 every single night. Ricky Rubio, one night could actually light the world on fire. The next night, he could be an absolute liability. Dean Wade could body up on a guy very physically and be able to contain him a little bit while not being able to contribute offensively that night. And then the very next night could look like an all-world player. Isaac Okoro could be an absolute lockdown Bruce Bowen type defender one night and go out and get you 35 points the next. But the way that everybody steps up on this team, Kevin has also got Kevin, even though it's going to be a little bit bittersweet asking for the buyout. I know this is certainly not the way that he wanted his tenure to end here in Cleveland. I know it's not for any Cavaliers fans how they wanted things to end here in Cleveland, but it's he's got to know that this franchise is in a better place with him gone because he was one of the big pieces that got them there. So happy trails, Kevin Love. We will certainly miss you here. I know I certainly will. Personally, it's going to be very, very weird looking at him suiting up against them after a 9-year run here. But Kevin, just like Anderson Varejao a few years ago, I'm sorry, not a few years ago, a few weeks ago, kind of coming back into the fold of the organization, whether he comes back, after his playing days are over, if he does something with UCLA, if he comes back to Minnesota in some capacity, if he ends up going to Los Angeles and gets involved with the Lakers or something of that nature, or let's say he still is an ambassador with the Cavaliers, considering this will now be the team that he spent the majority of his career with. He will be welcomed back. He will be in. He will have a jersey retired. He will be in a Ring of Honor somewhere. He will receive multiple awards, commendations, whoever by the franchise, the local sports media, anyone who tries to run Kevin out of town or badmouth in him. You can essentially kind of turn in your jersey, your hat, your T-shirts, anything like that now, because he does not deserve that after everything that he's done for you, regardless of his play, up until the youth movement got here. You can tell that Kevin's a competitor, and it's not something that he was accustomed to for that team to be on a team that bad, because he never really had that. Minnesota had some middle of the road teams. Minnesota was not nearly as bad as the Cavaliers were after Kyrie and LeBron had left, and the franchise was basically left bare with the exception of Love, which is why the Cavs had to sign him to that max extension just to be able to keep somebody there. Otherwise, they were only gonna win 15 games a year, although they did flirt with that a little bit. So again, thank you guys for joining me here tonight. If you catch the on demand, let me know what you guys think. I will be back with another sports note sometime later on this week. Again, there is a Nikola Jokic video being posted as we speak. Go check that out. And Mike Martinez and I will be back with a new episode of the Wise Guy Sports Show sometime in March for our first annual Wisey Awards. Mike is currently passing through Pennsylvania. He texted me a little over an hour ago. Running into Steeler fans. So yeah, Mike, you might want to put the pedal to the floor a little bit and get the hell out of there. But I will be talking with him on Saturday. But he'll check in with me, let me actually see the new place, and we should hopefully have an idea here by the end of the month as to an exact date for the Wiseys. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining me here tonight and on the On Demand. And I will see you very, very soon. Take care and good night.